I think we can get started now. And as people are coming in, I'll just add them. Welcome, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us, myself and Latifah Soobedar on the call. Hi, Latifah. How are you?
Good, thanks, Rabi. How are you?
I am doing very well. Again, my apologies on keeping you waiting and everybody else here. Sorry, I'm adding people in.
That's right. Don't worry.
Sorry, one second. Okay, all righty. So how's everybody doing? Again, my due apologies on the delay, guys. Today we have a very interesting topic, and Latifah and I, we are constantly talking and discussing about coming up with various topics that may be of interest to you guys. And I know there's one topic that's particularly of interest to me, and I know it is to a lot of other people, is about personalities and understanding personalities. We're always taking these tests, and we've all heard of like the famous Myers-Briggs tests and other personality tests to basically I always think of it as labeling ourselves or categorizing ourselves. We almost are trying to belong somewhere. So today I thought we would take our conversation with Latifah and actually get a better understanding of what these personalities, these universal personality types are, these archetypes are. And we're going to actually do these series in a 3-part. So today we're going to discuss 2 of the universal archetypes, and then we're going to continue this series for the next 2 Mondays as well. So guys, if you again have any questions, please message us throughout this conversation. We're going to have you on mute. For the last couple of times I've forgotten to record us, so I am recording us today. So this conversation will be made available for all of you to listen later, or for those of you who have not been able to join us. So welcome, everybody. Latifah, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Rabi. How are you?
Doing very well. So Latifah, when we talk about personalities, the immediate mind, immediately the name that comes to mind is Carl Jung, right? He is the father of analytical psychology. He was a Swiss psychologist, and from what I believe that he was a student of Sigmund Freud and collaborated with him, but later they went their separate ways, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that's correct. There is a very interesting story. I mean, so Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, they worked a lot on psychoanalytical work together. And there was, a lot of desire on the part of Freud that they should move forward and really, publish a lot of work that was part of their collaboration. But Freud, according to a lot of people, he's the father of psychology, but he somewhat lost the plot in his psychosexual theories. Jung got extremely upset. Jung then moved on and really did some amazing work in the field of not just psychology. So interestingly enough, he traveled the world and he worked in so many different areas trying to understand the full spectrum of the human being. He published about 200 different papers that informs not only psychology, but informs, politics, economics in so many ways because of the way he understood, human beings in the full spectrum of their personality. So he's definitely one of my favorites. Very esoteric, but I hope that today that we'll try and simplify him enough that it will have some meaning for you guys in your life.
That's amazing. So he defined these personalities as archetypes, I believe, right, Latifah? And from what I was reading about Carl Jung, he says that we all have, every person has a predisposed position, whether we have a dominant extroversion or introversion, right? And it is how we direct our energy, whether it's outward to the external world, or inwards towards our mind. And I know these things get very complicated to understand. But I guess the biggest question that comes is that, are our personalities nature driven or nurture driven? Because according to what he says, I believe, is that we've inherited a lot of our personality, right? So I know it's a long debate, but I would love to kind of get your view on starting off with personalities being, is this something that we inherit, or is this something that's within nature around us?
I think this is has been an age-old debate. I think this debate is going to continue very much into the future. I think that you will find that most parents will say that personality, when their kids are being rotten people, they inherited their personality from their dads, and vice versa, right? So I think that, you know, it's such a common practice for us to try and lay blame at somebody's door. And the reality is that the whole nature-nurture debate has been going on for a very long time. Now, interestingly enough, the best research that we can actually, the only way we can research and find concrete evidence to give, you know, sort of credibility to one school or the other is when we study identical twins, right? Because identical twins have the same genetic code. So what they did is they've done research, longitudinal studies on genetic identical twins that have been reared apart, right? So if the argument is the argument is for nature, then it would be obvious that identical twins reared apart would have the exact same personality, right? But the reality is that they found, having studied hundreds of pairs of twins that were reared apart, is that while there is a baseline similarity in personality, there is a vast difference in the whole spectrum of personality as a result of nature. So there is a baseline, and I think the way I like to describe it is that your nature, which is your genetics, what you inherit from your parents, is actually creates that your nature. So the genetics that you inherit creates a stage, right, for you. Think of it as your life stage. The way you dance on that stage really depends on your nurture. So your life experiences and the things that you're exposed to, that is what populates the full spectrum of your personality. And I think therefore it really makes the case for the fact that there is a really good divide between some of our personality is informed through our genetics, but a lot of our personality is actually created through the life experiences that we have.
The environment around us. Very beautifully put. In fact, when you were talking about this, Latifah, there's recently a documentary I saw on the plane, and I'd recommend it to people. I won't get into the detail. It's called Three Identical Strangers, and they talk exactly about that. There were three triplets who are identical, who were placed in different environments, and the whole documentary talks about how their personality gets impacted, you know, based on their environment as well. So, but tell me, Latifah, what is our need to understand, or why is there a need to basically label different personality types? How does that help us?
I think that there is huge value in us labeling personality types, not just for ourselves, but it informs our understanding of other people, and it definitely enhances our own self-awareness. Now, I'm going to say that and put a caution in with that comment. You know, there's so much in terms of psychometrics at the moment. There is so much out there, and so many different tests that claim to tell you what your core personality is. So some of you might be familiar with the Myers-Briggs Type Personality Indicator, which is known as the MBTI. It's actually based on Jung's archetypes, right? But what happens is that we put ourselves in a box. Now, the value of understanding our personality is that it gives us an awareness of the areas that we may need to work on. But not all of us are evolved enough to take that information and use it to enhance ourselves. What we do is we take that information and we use it as an excuse to actually excuse behaviors that we are unwilling to change. All right. So the whole awareness of coming to terms with these are the elements of my personality, what's working for me and what's not working, that's where the value is in understanding your personality type. So the caution is when you do a test or when you get exposed to somebody like Jung and his archetypes, please be mindful of the fact that you cannot use it as an excuse for bad behavior. You need to use it as a springboard to actually enhance your potential. And that's where the value of understanding your personality comes from.
Absolutely. And I think another point to also understand is that nobody is 100% certain personality type, right? Would you believe that? Like, I think we have a combination of certain effects. And I know that my other question I'm going to actually pose to you is, I know in our discussion, and you always bring up the concept of shadow personality. So I'd love for you to share with our friends on what do you mean by shadow personality?
Okay, I think it's such an important concept, but I think before we get into shadow personality, Rabia, I think it's really important for us to just go first and understand the archetypes and then get into why shadow is so important. So when Jung talked about archetypes, he spoke about universal blueprints for personality. So an archetype is a blueprint for your personality. And according to him, he said that each one has blueprints for all the different personality types in us. Now, in his definition, he defined 12 universal archetypes. Depending on which authors you choose to read, you may see some authors only focusing on the top 4, which we are going to talk about. You may get some authors just focusing on 6, but there are elements that exist that are common in all of them. So what he says is that we all have blueprints for personality according to these 12 archetypes, but one of them will always dominate to give us the personality that is reflected in our behavior to other people. So what other people see in us is that archetype, that dominant archetype, right? So when you hear about the archetypes, and today we're going to talk about the lover and the warrior, this may resonate with you and you may say, yes, that's me. But you may find that when we talk about the others in the following sessions, there are elements of that also resonates. But the one that resonates the most is the dominant one that gives you your personality. All right. So that's the archetypes. But the interesting thing, and I think the thing that I find the most interesting about Jung is his concept of the shadow personality. Right. And then, in my years of practicing, I think this is the thing that has helped a lot of people make shifts in their life and shifts in their relationships by understanding the shadow personality. So he defined the shadow personality as that element of your personality that you actually are the least comfortable with. So that part of your personality that you deny because you don't feel comfortable with it for whatever reason. You think that it symbolizes weakness, it symbolizes, a bad person in you. For whatever reason, you deny this aspect of your personality, so you reject it from your conscious mind, all right? But what happens is, why he calls it the shadow personality is because this element of our personality follows us around like a shadow. In other words, people are able to see elements of this personality even if we don't acknowledge it. I think the simplest way that I can explain the shadow, and those of you who are parents, I think this is going to be a very helpful awareness for you to have. Those of you who work in organizations with different people, there's going to be a big awareness for you in this. When you come across a person who is a representation of your shadow, okay? In other words, an element of your personality that you're not comfortable with, the experience that you have is like someone putting a magnifying glass in front of you saying, look at this, okay? This is who you are. And you will have an extreme level of discomfort with that person. You will get into conflict with that person for no obvious reason. And that is simply because they are a representation of your shadow. Now, I want you guys to do an introspection. Is there someone in your office that you constantly butt heads with for no reason? This person constantly gets under your skin. Every time they're in your presence, you feel a reaction to them, okay? This is usually because this person is their core personality is actually your shadow. And because you are not comfortable with your shadow, you are certainly not going to be comfortable with them. As a parent, there's usually one child that is a representation of your shadow. And this is the child that you constantly at loggerheads with. So if you take nothing away from today, you need to understand that this discomfort that you have is not to do with that person. It's to do with your own internal desire to reject a part of you that you need to embrace.
Wow, that's really powerful, Latifah. That's actually, it does make you all introspect for a moment there, to think about what is it that I am not liking about the other person that actually represents me. That's a very powerful statement, I must say.
And then the shadow gets us all into trouble a lot. In corporate relationships, it's one of those things that messes up a lot of our relationships. And I think as we grow our emotional intelligence and we bring awareness to our own selves, and we bring a willingness to accept our whole personality, we will be able to manage our relationships better. So I'm going to go back to the question you asked me right at the beginning. Why do we need to understand personality? We are social beings, maybe not so much right now. Okay, we're having to socialize on video and we're having to chat with people in different ways, but we're actually wired to connect with each other, right? And if we want these connections to be meaningful and impactful and positive and affirming, then it would behoove us to know ourselves well in order to know other people.
Makes
And
sense.
that's why we try to understand
Makes
personality.
sense. So, Latifa, the two personality types or the archetypes that we're going to discuss today are the warrior and the lover. I think people are waiting to get straight into it. So help us understand who a warrior is.
Okay, so the warrior archetype is sometimes called the hero as well, and I'm going to talk to you in different ways about the archetype and see whether it resonates for you. So when I say things about this particular personality type, I want you to do a mental checklist, and then I'm going to tell you the type of careers that people who are warriors usually have. So the warrior usually has a motto: where there's a will, there's a way. So in other words, the warrior will always go and get things done. And they operate from a core desire to prove that they are worthy, that they have self-worth by constantly doing things that are courageous, or going into what we call a proverbial battle to make sure that they achieve success. Okay, the goal is to experience or to become a master in a way that will improve the world in some way, or will conquer new directions or new avenues in the world.
Hmm.
But with all of this positivity in the warrior archetype, the greatest fear that a warrior has deep down inside of themselves is that they fear their own weakness, they fear their own vulnerability, and they fear being a chicken. So you will see that because this is a fear that they have deep down in them, they put on a veneer of being extremely tough and constantly getting into battle even when they don't need to make sure that they try and overcome this fear.
Mhm.
Okay, their strategy, the way they navigate the world, so people who have warrior archetypes, they tend to have a strategy: I'll be as strong and as competent as possible, and I won't allow people to see anything but this in myself. The weakness in this personality type is that there is a small element of arrogance, because they're always needing to go into battle, they're always needing to fight, they're always needing to conquer. And when you experience a warrior archetype, you often feel as if, I'm just having a conversation with you. Why does it feel as if this is a war? Okay, you will have this experience a lot when you dealing with warrior archetypes. But their talent, they have two core talents. They're extremely competent in whatever they do, and they have a lot of courage, so they take a lot of risks.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is the warrior archetype. It is a very popular archetype, and I think that you don't need me to tell you that CEOs of companies, women in leadership roles, people who are in leadership roles generally have warrior archetypes.
But tell me,
Okay.
Latifa, so immediately when you say the word warrior, so you said they're also called the hero, right? So in my mind, the hero and the warrior, like immediately there were two different definitions of it. The warrior, what I took from it was more of an aggressive person, assertive, more aggressive kind of a person. Is that true? Do they have more aggression in them? Are they always getting in conflict as well?
So, Rabi, I think you brought up a very interesting area of what we call idiomatic language. All right. So, idiomatic language is language rooted in the culture of the people who speak it.
Yeah.
So, when we take a definition of warrior, some cultures see warrior as a very positive label, a label of courage, a label of someone who is a protector, a label of someone who is a protector of values and a protector of society. And they see it in a very positive light. And therefore, defining warrior as passion. All
Sure.
right. And in different context, warrior then has all the negative connotations. So we tend to idiomatically see them differently. But the reality is that warriors tend to be heroes. Okay. They tend to be heroes because they go out and they fight the good fight, and they actually rescue people, and they actually rescue situations.
Okay.
So there might be an element of aggression, which we can then define as passion rather than aggression in warrior archetypes. The interesting discrepancy that we see is when we confront warrior archetypes in females, we tend to label them negatively. Okay, because the world's not comfortable with women in leadership roles. So she's a warrior archetype. She's extremely masculine, and therefore her passion is translated into aggression. So those of you listening in who think that the warrior resonates with you, embrace that. Okay, it's your passion and it's your strength, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Would you also consider a lot of the doers, the people who are always doing, as the warrior types or the
Not
busy?
necessarily. I mean, there are other archetypes that involve doers, warrior archetypes are specifically much more risk takers. They're much more groundbreakers, and they're much more in the leadership realm that we see warrior archetypes.
Sure. And so in contrast, who's a lover?
Well, let's ask the people here who are the lovers. Okay. So the lover is a wonderful archetype. Okay, they operate from the motto, "You're the only one." Okay, and their core desire is intimacy and experience in every sensory way that they want to have. Right. So the goal for the lover is to be in a relationship with people, to work and surround everybody with love. All right, but their greatest fear, and I guess this is where lovers really get into trouble in relationships, is their greatest fear is being alone. Their greatest fear is being unwanted or unloved or being unrecognized. Okay, and this is what trips them up a lot of the time. So you will often see lover personality or archetypes in problematic relationships, because the desire to propagate a relationship often comes with an element of self-sacrifice. Okay, so their strategy is they want to become more and more physically and emotionally attractive in order to attract relationships to themselves. So they spend an inordinate amount of time on their physical appearance and also working on themselves. Okay, and again, as I said before, one of their weaknesses is because they desire this, this desire to please others is directed so much outside. They often are at a risk of losing their own identity, because the desire to please, the desire to maintain relationships actually causes them to often disconnect with themselves. But their great talent of lover archetypes is that they're passionate, they're extremely grateful, they're extremely committed to whatever they do, but they also practice a lot of appreciation and they practice a lot of gratitude. So you can see that there are so many positive elements in the lover archetype, and I think there are so many lovers out there that we all know. It's a really beautiful archetype. Now, interestingly, the reason that we chose today to pair the lover and the warrior is that often people who have warrior archetypes have lover shadows. Okay, this is quite a common combination where the warrior archetype is so dominant, but there is such a core of the lover that the person denies for whatever reason. Life experience, having to constantly work really hard to prove yourself in a man's world, for example, for a woman, or a man who had to struggle really hard to build the empire that he built, and he did not want to ever be seen as weak or taken advantage of. So he denied the soft elements of himself, and he suppressed the lover in him. And he struggles with people who he sees as lovers, which is a beautiful archetype. He rejects them as weak, right? So it's a very interesting combination that we see often between the lover and the warrior. And in therapy, when I see, people with warrior archetypes that are struggling with relationships, or in coaching when they're struggling with leadership, most of the work we do is around integrating the lover shadow into the warrior archetype, so that the person becomes more whole and well-rounded.
That's so interesting. As you were talking, one thought that kind of comes to me, Latifah, is, I love how you kind of described it, but what part of our personality is, or do we have different personalities from what we show to the world versus what we are on the inside? So I may be a warrior as I go and show my personality to the world, but am I really that warrior on the inside? Does that make any sense? I don't know if my question actually
so you actually moving into the realm of what we call a public persona and a private persona.
Sure.
Okay, and the journey that we walk in terms of our public and our private persona is really based on our confidence. All right, so the more we evolve our confidence, the more we evolve our internal locus of control, which means we trust ourselves and we trust our own instincts, our drives, our desires, and we measure that against information coming from the outside. Our confidence grows when our internal locus of control becomes more solidified. We are then more comfortable with amalgamating our public and our private persona. What this simply means is that who I am when I'm alone in the room, when the door is closed, is the same when I walk outside into the world and you meet me. Okay. Now, most people, this is a journey. Okay. So I may have a warrior archetype, but I may tone it down a lot, because I haven't been able to create an environment for myself where I feel safe to show that. Okay. So, this is a case of, we do this, we put these veneers on in order to protect ourselves, but in reality it really harms us, because ultimately your true personality cannot be hidden for a long time. I was reading an article that spoke about the different masks. I was reading a poem as well around it, about the different masks that we wear in different phases of our lives, and sometimes at different times of the day. And I think this journey to us becoming better and more rounded as human beings is to remove the mask and bravely emerge into the sun with who we really are. Okay. We cannot do that if we don't do this discovery, if we don't spend time trying to figure out who that person really is.
Makes a lot of sense. We have a couple of questions coming in, so I'll just read out those questions. Anjum asked, as time goes by, do we change from one personality type to another?
Okay, that's a very interesting and a very valid question. So, in psychology, we say that your personality is only fixed in place at the age of 21. So we actually won't do definitions of personality at 21. And we also say that the core of a person's personality is pretty stable over their life, but with huge life experience. So if we have basically extremely relevant events that happen in our life that we call life-changing events, we have seen people's personalities shift into different types after an extremely significant life event. But in reality, you will see that people will have a clustering. So remember, we have 12 blueprints, and each of those 12 are clustered into different types. Now, what will happen is that you could possibly move into a different personality within the same type. Right? So which means that I might move from a warrior into more of a sage personality type, right? So simply because I have moved into a different stage of my life, and so now I've become somebody who is much more wise, and I use my wisdom in a different way. I still have elements of warrior, but what will be showing in me will be something that evolves. So Anjum, to answer your question in a short version, our whole personality will not reinvent itself, but with time, we will probably trim it the way we trim a tree into different shapes, depending on the experiences that we have in our life.
I completely agree. Amir is asking that can you have both personalities? So not having it as a shadow, but both the lover and the warrior at the same time.
That is the ultimate goal. Okay, the ultimate goal is that if you have managed to integrate the warrior and lover into a perfect blend, then you have a highly evolved personality, and well done for you. That's the goal of therapy for most people who come to see us, is integrating these elements into one.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to open it up to more questions. So if you guys have any questions and you're going to send them, or if you just message me and I'll unmute you so you can ask questions as well.
And I think we'd also really like to hear from you whether you found this, this topic relevant, and whether you think that this is something that it has meaning for you, because we're making a slight shift from our previous discussions, which were very much related to the current situation, and trying to make sure that we kind of give you some tools to navigate the whole of your life and not just the lockdown. So we'd be really interested to see whether this resonates with you as well.
So guys, as you're thinking of your questions, Latifah, tell me something. It just made me think when you were talking about parents earlier, right? So if depending on the archetypes that each of the parents have, what do you usually see, like as you see, I guess from a research perspective, that do the kids have similar personality types to their parents? Or is it more sometimes their parent shadows that show up in children? Or can your kids have a completely different personality type?
So I think that you will see that in the formative years, so in teenage years, you will often see traits or elements of the parents' archetypes in the children as they are trying to forge their own identities and trying to emerge in the world as their own individual people. But in adult life, you will often see one child will be a representation of a shadow of their parent, and that's simply because of the way they were raised. They kind of went in the opposite direction for what the parent was, and generally that is the shadow of a personality. So you will see some children And it really depends on how you were raised, how rigid the structure was in your family, how strong the rules were, how much you were forced to conform to certain ideals that your parents enforced, or whether your parents were free thinkers and gave you the spirit and the freedom to let your own personality emerge. So what I've seen over the years in my practice is that children who are brought up in very prescribed, rigid, very patriarchal type of homes, they tend to take on the personality of one of their parents. Okay. And one sibling will definitely be the poor thing that will be the butt of everybody's anger and hatred in the home. But if you brought up, and again, it's the whole nature nurture debate again, right? So we brought up in a home where you were given the freedom to express yourself. I've often found it unbelievable that parents have come to me with a kid who's left-handed and said, why is this child left-handed? We need to get him to write, and we're forcing him to write with their right hand. And that is just such a wrong thing to do. Left-handed children have highly creative personalities. They are highly imaginative, and you're basically stunting it. Or your kid is very creative and esoteric in the way they dress, and they put things together in a very flourishing, flowery way. And the mother is horrified by this because, we tend to see our children as representations of ourselves. And she tries to totally break this. That is where you will actually see the change in personality and the child's archetype more like the parent. You're doing the child a disservice.
Makes sense.
Give children freedom to explore the full range of their own personality.
Yes, please do that. So we have Aman here who is saying, so if we automatically reject aspects of our shadow personality, does that mean we are automatically attracted to personalities that share our own attributes?
Yes, we will generally reject people who are a representation of our shadow because it's too much for us to bear. But the interesting thing is that our shadow personality will always intrigue us. So while we will butt heads with people who are representation of our shadow, there will always be this element of intrigue with that person. So you will constantly be in conflict with them, but they will intrigue you because in all our relationships, we resonate with people who somehow feel familiar to us. So people who are your shadow will generally feel familiar in not a nice way. Your discomfort will be there, but you will be attracted to them. Your overt comfort, so at a subconscious level, you will be attracted to people who represent your shadow. And at a conscious level, you will be attracted to people who are a representation of your archetype.
Makes sense. Rihanna is asking, this talk is highly beneficial, especially in these current times. We have been put in a situation staying home 24/7 with people we may have not had time with before. In order to understand different people, we have to understand ourselves. Absolutely, Rihanna, you said it. It totally makes sense. Amir's asking, does genes have to do with personalities or play some part?
Amir, he heard the beginning of our maybe you missed the beginning. So they play some part in our personality development, but our life experiences plays an equally important part.
Absolutely. Guys,
I just wanted to, while you're asking, I just want to go back to Rihanna's comment. I think it's such an important one. And I think, Rihanna, it doesn't only resonate for people who are living with people that they may not know so well. Honestly, you could have been married to someone for 20 years and discover things in this scenario that you never knew before. Okay? Because every circumstance that we experience in our life unlocks a different element of our personality and awakens us to an element of ourselves that we never knew. Likewise, awakens us to a reality of our partner that we never knew. So, having an openness to accept that this is a journey of awakening. This is what the lockdown is, okay? I think will make it easier for us to experience this and bear it a little bit better.
Absolutely. So guys, we're almost up to our time. What I did want to do is, as you know, Latifah herself has her own practice. So if somebody is looking to kind of have more one-on-one conversation, then you'd like to kind of take that with Latifah, I'm going to actually put her number and her email, and I'm putting in my number and my email as well. So Latifah and I are actually designing a few workshops and programs that are going to be coming out in the next few months. So keep an eye out for those. We're designing a lot of our programs for corporates as well, which we'll keep you abreast of. So I will share my details as well as Latifah's details. Do get in touch with us, share your feedback with us, and let us know what you think of these sessions, or if you have ideas for more sessions, or if you just want to have one-on-ones with us. So I'm going to see if everybody can see it. I've sent a message to everybody. Zara just asked a question. She's saying, Latifah, are our triggers a sign of your shadow self?
Not always, but definitely some of our triggers are. So, some of our triggers are definitely a side of are triggered by our shadow personality. But there is another concept, and maybe we'll do a session next time, because we're going to, in the next personality types, we're going to talk about defense mechanisms as well, and we'll talk about schemas. But not all triggers are a representation of your shadow. Some triggers are representation of other core beliefs about ourselves that are negative beliefs that get triggered by things that people say and do. So shadow plays some role, but there is a lot more complexity around triggers. And if this is an area of interest for you guys, maybe we do a session on, what are the hot buttons and how those actually impact on our lives.
Sounds good. If you guys don't have any questions.
I see one more comment in the chat, Rabi. That's you putting.
Yeah, I just sent one to just so that everybody has our contact information. Somebody privately just sent a message saying, very interesting, never thought to evaluate myself before. Thank you. And guys, that's what these talks are about, like Rehanna mentioned, we are in these times, these are special circumstances, but thanks to technology, this has given us this option to virtually meet every week and discuss ideas, what's on your mind, what's on our mind. We get the privilege of like picking Latifah's brain and getting informed and learning. So if anything we can do to better ourselves, I think that's what our goal is here. Latifah, do you want to have the last word here?
Yeah, I mean, I also want to say that please send us messages as to the kind of things you want us to talk about. We're kind of making assumptions based on the conversations. We tend to have quite a lot of conversations. So we're making assumptions what you guys would be interested in, but we'd really be interested in hearing what you guys have to say. I also wanted to just end with a quote from Jung, one of my favorite ones, which he said is, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of a mere being. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And I think that quote really talks about the shadow. So I'm going to encourage you guys to look inward, embrace all elements of your personality, because all of them are going to serve you. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Next week, same time, Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Singapore time. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.